my name is Leah. Welcome back to my channel. Exciting news! We're filming with my new camera. So hopefully this is looking and sounding good because, you know, this is my test video. I want to start doing these wrap-up videos seasonally, so it is time now at the end of February for my winter wrap-up. This is going to cover all of the books that I read December through February. And there's really nothing to say besides that, so we will jump right in. The first two books that I read back in December that I have to talk about today were The Betrothed and The Betrayed by Kierra. These two are part of a duology, and I love Kierra. She's like my guilty pleasure author. I freaking love the selection so much. I've also read The Siren by her, and so when I heard that she was coming out with these two new books, which they're not like new, they've been out for a little while, I was super excited about them. I didn't get around to it too quickly because, like I said, they're kind of like candy. I don't know, her writing is like candy to me, and so I have to be in the mood for something sweet, you know? And finally, I was in the mood for something sweet. Both of these I read by audiobook, so that's something that I have been trying to get into more recently, is utilizing my library more, and one of the ways that I've been doing that is audiobook. But about my thoughts, I don't know how many of you have read this and how many of you stumbled across this realization the way that I did, but it became pretty apparent to me in the first book, which I didn't know about, was that it was a retelling of the story of Ruth from the Bible, which I thought was interesting, but it meant that the end of the first book, which is something happens at the end of the first book which shocked a lot of people. I saw it coming like a mile off. There was zero hints in the book itself that this was happening, but the fact that I recognized that this was a Ruth retelling, that sort of clued me in on what was going to happen at the end. Overall, I didn't rate these two super high on my Goodreads, mainly because I didn't enjoy them quite as much as I enjoyed like The Selection and The Siren of hers. I mean, I was interested enough to read both of them, like I didn't DNF, but I don't think it was really because the books themselves were like captivating me or anything. It was more just because of my curiosity and to see how she executed the retelling, and also how she was going to wrap everything up. Again, not really even because of like the story itself was like, oh, I wonder what's gonna happen next. I was just kind of curious to see what would happen, if that makes sense. My main complaint with these books, and the main thing that bugged me, was that some of the politics, like it was very much a lot more focused on the romance and the relationships in it than a like realistic political landscape, if that makes sense. And because of that, I found it very distracting when certain characters or leaders or whatever would make decisions based off of, I don't know, I guess the romance versus the political atmosphere actually playing an important role. Or not even just because of the romance, but just because of who the main character was written to be, if that makes sense. As an example, it's established early on that these neighboring countries have tension and that there's conflict on the border. At one point, Hollis, who is the main character, is in the presence of the enemy king or whatever, and there's announced that, oh, there was another conflict at the border, what should we do? And the king is like mad about this, he wants to retaliate, blah, 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 blah. And Hollis just kind of like suggests that, oh, well, if there's fighting over it, you should just cede some of your land because your country is a lot bigger than my country back home. So you should just cede some of your land and that will stop the conflict. I just couldn't buy it because the king was just like, oh yes, that's a good idea. And I just couldn't buy this king who has been established as ruthless and selfish and will do anything to keep hold of his power. Like, I couldn't buy that he would just cede land to stop the conflict rather than holding on to what was his own. So it was a lot of that, like, those, like, political things that just didn't click for me and make sense for me, and so that's kind of what made me not enjoy it as much. I wish that it was just a lot more focused on the romance and the relationships, because I feel like that's what makes Kierra books good, is how addictive she writes relationships and romance. Because, like, in The Selection, there's a little bit of political stuff that happens, but the main focus really is just on the selection process and the relationships. And I think that's what makes it so good, is that we don't have to do a ton of world building or like buy into a complex, sophisticated world. We just get to like live in this fun fantasy setting, or in the case of the selection, technically a dystopian setting, and just live there and be happy and fun and watch people fall in love. So that's my main complaint about those two. The next book that I read, which I finished, I think I started in December and finished in January, was Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. This one blew me away. I really loved the world, I really loved the characters, and I'm glad that I picked it up because I'd heard about it a while back whenever it first came out. I never picked it up. But the reason I read this was because I was looking for comps for my book, and Shadow of the Fox is also a dual POV where the two main characters are kind of like going on a journey together. So I thought that it would make an interesting comp if it like fit, but I wanted to read it first, of course, to make sure that was the case. And again, I'm so glad that I did. I really loved it. This is basically about two main characters. One is like the owner of a demon sword, essentially. And if he lets his emotions like come to the surface too much, the demon can take over, essentially. And that's bad because the demon is super powerful and will kill everybody. And then the other main character is a kitsune. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but it's basically a creature from Japanese folklore, which is a like fox spirit person. So she's half kitsune, which means that she has a bit of magic, she can see the spirit world. She was raised by monks, but whenever her temple falls under attack, she's charged with bringing a particular scroll to a different temple for safekeeping, because if all the scrolls are united, the end of the world happens, basically. Well, not quite. The person who does it can summon a being who will grant them anything they desire. And that's gone wrong in the past, and so they're pretty much trying to prevent that from happening again. Demon Sword Man is one of the people trying to gather the pieces, and so they have to journey together to the other temple because he thinks that that's where the scroll was taken already, and she just wants protection on the way there, so they're kind of like lying to each other in terms of like their motivation. But I absolutely love this story. I am really excited to continue on with this series. I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy. That's definitely gonna be on my TBR for the rest of the year, is finishing this series. My favorite parts were definitely the world. Like, it was a very rich world, and I love the way the two main characters kind of like played off of each other and like the lessons that they taught each other. I just felt like that dynamic with the dual POV was really nice and was definitely something that I was interested in looking at from like a learning perspective as well, because like I said, like that's kind of what I'm writing, is that dual POV with that dynamic as well. The next book I will only briefly mention because I talked about it in my last video, and that is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I thought when I included it in that video that I was gonna finish it within that next week. I simply did not because I am terrible. But I did finish it in January finally, and I did really enjoy it like I thought I would. So if you want my thoughts on King of Scars, go watch my last wrap-up video. The next three books we have are all kind of connected because they are all part of the same series, and that is Fairy Tale Detectives, The Unusual Suspects, and The Problem Child, all by Michael Buckley. These are the first three books in the Sisters Grimm series, which is a middle grade series about sisters who are descendants from the Grimm brothers. Essentially, at one point, there was a town where the fairy tale creatures moved to America to live in order to just have like their own little fairy tale community. But as more people started coming and tensions started to break out, one of the Grimm brothers decided that it would be safer for everyone if all the fairy tale creatures were kind of trapped in this town. So he made a deal. Baba Yaga cast a spell, and now all the fairy tale creatures are trapped in this town, and the spell will last as long as a Grimm also lives in that town. These are books that I read whenever I was, I think, in 6th grade. I absolutely loved them at the time, but I only read the first 4. I don't think I really realized that they were part of a series, or lost interest after a while, you know, like as I was reading other things and getting older. And so because of that, I never actually finished the series. And then at one point I was like, I'm too old for this, I'm just gonna donate them. And I got rid of the books, for some reason. And so now I've been on a quest to collect all of the Sisters Grimm books, specifically the old covers, because I just really like this art style for middle grade, like the just fairy tale illustration type covers. These are books 2 and 3. I do not have book 1 with me, so I checked that one out at my library. And then this one is paperback and this one is hardback. So we've got some mix mash, but I would prefer to just have the original covers than the new / updated covers. But I read all of these books mainly because I have been trying to read more middle grade lately. I'm making a video about all of this, so I won't go into too much detail, but I just want to be reading more middle grade, and these were some of my favorites as a kid, and so I thought it was time to start my reread of the series. I have one more book to reread and then everything else is new to me, which is so exciting. I'm loving these books like just as much as I loved them as a kid. It's really interesting comparing my mental image of what I remember happening to what is actually happening in the words, because sometimes they don't line up, and it's been an interesting thing to like realize that my memory is not in fact infallible, which, you know, I think is an obvious thing, but also it's just really funny to see that in practice. So yes, loving the Sisters Grimm series. I stopped because I was like, Leah, you need to read other things. You can't just like binge this 9-book series all at once. But I'm excited to continue. I feel like I've read enough other things now to be able to pick it up again. So I'll probably have a few more of these in my next wrap-up video, or maybe all of them. Who knows? The next book that I read, this one I finished end of January or beginning of February, I can't remember. That is Into the Woods by John Yorke. This is a writing craft book, not craft necessarily, but it's more like a study on story structure, which, you know, I love. And essentially this book is looking to find like what that core essence of story is. It's looking at all the different types of story structure formats that exist, and sort of just comparing, contrasting them, and discussing what is the essential form of story. Like, where do all of these different things like Save the Cat, like the hero's journey, all of these structure forms, where did they come from? Are they unique? Are they different? Or are they just interpretations of the same thing, basically? So I really enjoyed this. It really got down to the nitty-gritty of like what is literally the essence of story structure? What is that essential form? It kept asking those questions to, I think, bring it deeper and dig it deeper than I've seen discussed in a structure book before, so I really enjoyed it. It's got a lot of good breakdown examples, which again, I really enjoy just because I'm a visual person, and so I like to see how form looks like laid out. And then an interesting thing is in the back here, it has kind of a chart comparing all the different structure forms and like laying them all on top of each other. So I really enjoyed this. I'll probably go into more detail whenever I do another writing craft book discussion video. But for now, I definitely recommend check this one out if you're interested in story structure stuff. I do have 2 current reads that I planned on including in this video, but I'm not done with them yet, so those will be in my spring wrap up in like months from now. Something that this like winter reading season has really driven home for me is that I literally need to start just forcing myself to read more. Specifically in the morning, I've mentioned that I have an off and on habit of reading for like 30 minutes every morning, and I legitimately just need to do that and stick to that every single time, because when I don't do that, when I'm like, oh, I'm busy today, I'll skip this for now and read in the afternoon, I never do. It sucks. And whenever I try to be like, I'll just read before bed, again, I never do, because my brain doesn't want to do that in the evening. So I just need to like suck it up and read in the morning, every single morning. I'm really proud of how much I've read this season. This is the most I've read in a really long time. And I do feel better for it. Like, I feel so much more creative and inspired to write. But those are the 8 books that I read and finished this winter. Let me know down below if you have read any of these, what your thoughts were. I would love to have a little chat about them with you. Specifically Sisters Grimm. Have any of you read that series? I'm loving it. It's one of my faves, and I'm excited to like keep going. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!